Good morning. Good Yontif. In the year 1170, a merchant ship on its way from northern Africa across the Indian Ocean was lost at sea. And aboard that ship was a man named David ben Maimon. News of his loss must have devastated his family. He left behind a wife and a young daughter, as well as an older brother. This family had recently fallen on hard times, being forced from their home in Cordoba and traveling across North Africa before eventually settling in Egypt. And David, specifically, was charged with finding new economic opportunities. Unsatisfied with the potential for trade in the area, David set his sights east, against the wishes of his older brother, only to meet a tragic end shared by many in those times, seeking to embark on such a treacherous journey. 8 years following his disappearance, David's older brother described the impact of his loss in a letter. He wrote, "On the day I received that terrible news, I fell ill and remained in bed for about a year, suffering from a sore boil, fever, and melancholy, and was almost given up. About 8 years have since passed, but I am still in mourning and unable to accept consolation. And how should I console myself? He grew up on my knees. He was my brother. He was my student. And my joy in life was to look at him. Now all joy has gone. He has passed away and left me disturbed in my mind in a foreign country. Whenever I see his handwriting or one of his letters, my heart turns upside down and my grief awakens again." David's brother, who felt this sorrow so deeply, was Moses ben Maimon, better known to us as Maimonides or the Rambam, one of the greatest Jewish scholars and philosophers, not only of his time, but in all of Jewish history. Reading such a beautiful and heart-wrenching lament by Maimonides in this letter, which we only recently recovered in the Cairo Geniza, is powerful in many different ways. For one, we gain a glimpse into the close relationship shared between two brothers who had been through so much together. But even more striking is the insight these words offer into the inner life of a thinker known for his fierce rationalism. Here in these lines, we see not the great eagle of Jewish thought, but a man still in mourning, several years after the loss of his brother. In this letter, we see Maimonides admitting to a struggle with what we would now, in our times, describe as depression. To see such vulnerability and a willingness to talk about what many still see as a profoundly personal struggle is impressive for anyone, let alone a figure venerated for his intellect, such as Maimonides. I'm sure it was not easy for him to talk about his pain, even after so much time. Of course, I can't know that for sure, but I know how difficult it is for us, even with all we know in the 21st century, to talk about our own pain and our own mental health. It is easy to look back into history and presume that people in ancient or medieval times knew little to nothing compared to the knowledge we've gleaned from modern medicine, science, and psychology. But I think many of us would be surprised by what they did know when it came to the total health of human beings. We need only look at other writings by Maimonides, who, aside from being a scholar and philosopher, was also an accomplished physician. As a part of a regimen of health for his primary patient and benefactor, the Egyptian Sultan Afdal Nur al-Din Ali, Maimonides wrote, "It is known to our master, may God prolong his days, that passions of the psyche produce changes in the body that are great, evident, and manifest to all. As evidence, you can see a person of robust build, ringing voice, and glowing face, when there reaches them, unexpectedly, news that afflicts them. You will observe that all of a sudden their color dims, the brightness of their face departs, and often they tremble from the magnitude of weakness. Here, Maimonides clearly acknowledges the connection between physical and mental health. He goes on to explain that periods of melancholy or depression in our terms should be treated just like any other illness. It too is a disease, one that we cannot treat on our own. The connection between mental health and physical health may seem obvious to many of us. Yet for so many in our society, one is seen as more real than the other. Statistically, 1 in 5 American adults experience mental illness of some kind, yet less than half receive treatment on a consistent basis. While general awareness of mental health issues has certainly increased in recent years, the stigma surrounding it continues to cast a long shadow, not only in the awkward glances, uncomfortable nods, or concerned whispers we might expect, but also in what insurance companies consider essential health care. And all of this has only become more apparent in the past year and a half, where the COVID virus has taken an immense toll on all of our physical and mental well-being. So many of us, myself included, have dealt with significantly higher levels of anxiety and depression over the course of this pandemic. Each one of us here in this room or joining online have gone through our own struggles. But how many of us have shared that struggle with someone else? How many of us have finally said, I need help. I can't do this on my own. I can't know for sure, but if the statistics have anything to say, the percentage is much lower than it should be. The truth is that even as we continue to live through this COVID pandemic, we in the United States are also experiencing a mental health epidemic. According to Mental Health America, the prevalence of mental illness was increasing even before the pandemic, but has grown at a much higher rate in 2020 and into 2021. The growing numbers do point to increased awareness of the issue and perhaps more willingness among people to admit their struggles. But the reality is that the majority of people do not receive the help that they need. This is partially due to the way our healthcare system operates, which appears to express the stigma around mental health institutionally. In an April 2020 article, Dr. Susan Song, director of the Division of Child, Adolescent, and Family Psychiatry at the George Washington University Medical Center, explains that despite federal laws that require mental health and medical services to be comparable, mental health care continues to lack the same reimbursements as care for physical health. For this reason, many psychiatrists do not accept insurance due to poor reimbursement rates. It would seem that our society and institutions ignore the clear connection between mental and physical health we learn both from modern science and from medieval medicine. The statistics are even more concerning when it comes to teens and young adults, particularly among young people of color and members of the LGBTQ community. In 2017-2018, 60% of youth with major depression did not receive any mental health treatment. And since the beginning of the COVID pandemic in 2020, young people ages 11 to 17 have been more likely than any other group to experience moderate to severe symptoms of anxiety and depression. For one final statistic, in September of 2020, over half of 11 to 17-year-olds reported having thoughts of suicide or self-harm for the majority of the 2 weeks prior to the study. And roughly 35% of those folks, those young folks, identified as LGBTQ. What all these numbers and stats tell us is that people are struggling. We are struggling. And still so many go without the help that we so desperately need. But we must continually remind ourselves and remind each other that we don't have to struggle alone. We must always remember that by being a part of a sacred community, we can listen to and care for one another. We may not all be physicians like Maimonides or psychiatrists like Dr. Song, but if we can find more ways of being vulnerable and sharing our struggles, the burden we feel might be lessened, even just a little. And a model for this can actually be found in the ancient practice of Yom Kippur. According to the book of Leviticus, the ancient ritual performed in the Mishkan and the tabernacle and eventually brought into the temple in Jerusalem involved presenting 2 goats before the high priest for sacrifice. One was to be offered on the altar, while the other, through a specific ritual, was intended to carry all of the sins of the nation into the desert wilderness, thereby absolving the people of Israel of their transgressions and allowing them to begin the new year with a renewed sense of purity and holiness. After all, we are, as we read in today's Torah portion, intended to be Kedoshim, holy. From our modern viewpoint, we might see this ritual as archaic or superstitious at best. I think it's safe to say that most of us don't view sin as a real thing in the world that can be transferred onto an animal, a chicken, or anything else for that matter. But for our ancient predecessors, sin, purity, impurity were very real states of being that impacted our physical well-being. They, like Maimonides, recognize that the struggles and regrets we carry within ourselves can be extremely detrimental to our health. By externalizing our struggles, placing even just a bit of their burden on something outside of ourselves, we can live more healthy, more holy lives. I hope that we can carry this lesson into this new year of 5782. Even as we continue to struggle amidst the COVID pandemic and the toll it continues to take on our mental and physical well-being, I hope that we can find ways to share our struggles with others, even just a little bit. I hope that we can feel strong enough to ask for help when we need it, and know that we don't have to go through these difficult times alone. Now let me be clear. Those of us who do struggle with mental health should seek treatment from trained professionals. One area where we have a bit more expertise than Maimonides is that mental illness is something largely to be treated, not fully cured. And it requires the attention of those with proper training. But my hope is that we, as part of this sacred community, prioritize health, briut, both mental and physical, as a form of the holiness, the kedusha we strive to bring into the world together. Though the pandemic and the modern age in general has presented many new challenges when it comes to mental health, it has also brought amazing opportunities for new solutions. Opportunities for telehealth and virtual therapy have increased access for many people struggling with depression, anxiety, or other mental health issues. And though I am so grateful to see so many of you in person here today, modern technology has allowed this community to lean on each other through immensely difficult times. A true testament to your resilience and commitment, as Rabbi Egger so beautifully showed us on Rosh Hashanah. Please know that if you are struggling with your mental health, we here at Kol Ami are here for you. Whether it's for a professional referral or simply sharing a bit of your burden, we hope to serve as a resource and comforting presence in times of need. We all need help sometimes. And while that can be scary and difficult to admit, It's often the first step on the road to getting better. In this new year of 5782, may we lean on each other and find ways to share in our pain and our struggles. May we know that even though it may sometimes feel like it, we are not alone. May we be mindful of the unseen struggles our friends and family may be going through, and do our best to listen with open ears and open hearts. And may we recommit ourselves both as individuals and as part of this Kihila Kedosha, this sacred community, to making this year one of rest and renewal, comfort and compassion, health and holiness. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may it be God's will. Ken Yehi Ritzonenu, may it be our will. And let us say, Amen.